Good morning and welcome to our session today on world-class receiving and put-away. This is one of 10 modules in our world-class warehousing and material handling course, and you could argue this is the most important. I like the subject so much I could argue that almost any of them are the most important. But the bottom line is, if we receive things poorly, the odds of us picking them and shipping them properly are pretty close to zero. So we got to get this right. And there's a set of principles that we've developed over the years that we think do a pretty good job of explaining what world-class receiving and put away really looks like. One of the general principles is to try to minimize the number of handling steps throughout the process. And you'll see that play out as we go through these principles. And world class literally means world class. These practices and principles have been collected and developed and adopted since the late 1980s, literally collected from around the world in the travels and in the consulting and in the research that we do. So I hope you'll enjoy this little trip through world-class receiving and put away, and we'll go ahead and get started with the just general objectives of what we're trying to do in this module. The first is I can't emphasize enough just how important receiving and put away is in the whole process of warehousing. If we Maybe you've heard the expression garbage in, garbage out, but if we receive it incorrectly, the odds of us shipping it correctly are very close to zero. The second is it's important to understand how receiving and put away are linked with all of the other activities, not just in the warehouse, but in the supply chain as a whole. There's a very direct link between receiving and put away and the suppliers that we've chosen and the practices that we've chosen to use to integrate with those suppliers. The third is, we want to show you these practices. It's easy to talk about them, but you know the expression that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we think it's important to show as many pictures as possible. Also, up on my YouTube channel, there's a whole section devoted to video clips of world-class receiving and put away practices and actions. So I'd encourage you to check that out as a part of this training. So there are two overarching principles, we could say. These are part of our Right House practices assessment. But the general idea in receiving is that all of the resources, you know, to accomplish this, they need to be scheduled. So it's a proactive activity. It's not something that is reactive. The second is that there's all kinds of different flow paths that receipts can take. We want to make sure that for each product coming from each type of supplier, we have chosen the minimum cost flow path. We also want to make sure that we're processing receipts at the dock that is most appropriate for that receipt, that we're doing a good job inspecting and dimensioning and weighing as a part of that receiving process. On the put-away side, we want to make sure that we've prioritized those put-aways. Not all put-aways were created equal. Some are due sooner than others. Some are easier to handle than others. So we want to make sure that there's a way to assign priorities and then execute those priorities. Also, we want to do all that we can to put away immediately so there's not a long delay between the receiving and the put-away process. We want to make sure that we've chosen the optimal location for the put away and that we're executing to it. We would like to combine put away and retrieval activity to maximize the labor utilization, the equipment utilization. And just like on the picking side, where we'd like to batch and sequence picks, we'd also like to batch and sequence putaways, where we can take advantage of that practice to make sure the put away activity is as productive as possible. So at a very high level, these will be the principles that will be guiding us through the receiving and put away activity. There are about 20 principles that make up what we call world-class receiving and put away. Instead of reading them to you, what I'm going to do is walk us through them. You'll see them appear on the screen here as we go through, but this will serve as our outline, and also you can use it as a report card for your own receiving and put away activity. So we'll begin where we typically begin, which is with metrics. And the general idea is, just like in any activity, we're going to have to define what success looks like and what failure looks like. And it's difficult to do that without a set of metrics. So the first thing we're going to do is to define a set of metrics for receiving and put away. And it's a set that we have used for years and years that we'd recommend to you. And the set goes something like this. So first of all, there should be a set of financial indicators that help us understand how well or how poorly we're performing in receiving and put away. So we like to look at things like the cost per load received, purchase order received, purchase order line received, pallet, case, piece, how much it costs us to put away a line, a pallet, a case, a piece, a pound, a cube. Just some cost guidelines to help us understand relative to budget, relative to sales, relative to cost of goods sold, relative to what a third party could do, relative to the level of activity. How are we doing on a cost basis? The second is, and very closely related, is on the productivity side. We'd like to know how much man hour is being expended in receiving and put away. So we typically look at things like how many loads, orders, lines, pallets, cases, pieces, etc. are handled per man hour, and the same thing on the put away side. In most warehouses, labor is the most expensive resource, so we need to get a good handle on just how many man hours are being employed in receiving and put away. The third is there's a lot of time, oftentimes eaten up in the receiving and put away activity. So from a cycle time standpoint, we like to track the dock to stock time. That's the elapsed time from when a receipt shows up on the premises um, until it's executed, till it's handled, and when the goods are ready to be um, shipped or they're available for picking. Second is if we have some standards along those lines, we'd want to make sure that we're recording what portion of the putaways or putaway lines or cases are handled within whatever that target time might look like. One of the metrics that's often overlooked in putaway is the accuracy of that activity. Most organizations measure inventory accuracy. Very few measure put away accuracy. It is very difficult to pick something correctly or count something correctly if we put the goods away in the wrong location. So I often recommend to our clients that they maintain a quality control group in the warehouse, and this is one of the assignments that they have is to monitor put away accuracy, just like they would be monitoring picking accuracy, shipping accuracy, and inventory accuracy. This way, if there are mistakes, we can catch them early in the process instead of late in the process when it's difficult to do something about it. Something else we like to monitor is the damage rate in put away, oftentimes because of the excess handling or sorting that may be required. A good portion of the damage may occur in the put away process. If we damage something in put away, it's very difficult to ship it without damage. Again, it's back to the garbage in, garbage out principle. Also, we monitor safety in the put away activity. And then, just like there's a perfect order percentage, you can think of a perfect put away percentage where essentially it's everything went just like it should. So the put away was executed on time. There were no discrepancies, there was no damage, and there was no accident. So it's a way of applying the perfect order concept to the put away process. And if we had a set of metrics like that to help govern receiving and put away, we'd be very close to the top of the class. We've benchmarked several of these metrics over the years. One of the ones that I wanted to highlight was dock to stock time. In general, you could think of a median performance being around 8 hours to clear the dock, and a best in class being around 4 hours to clear the dock. So that's the first principle. The second is what we call receiving flow optimization. The basic idea is that given all the potential flow paths for a receipt, we've selected the one that's the most appropriate for that particular receipt from that particular vendor. There are 5 candidate ways of receiving product. One is called direct shipping. So the basic idea is we move product straight from the vendor to the customer. In that case, we only handle the product twice, at the vendor's shipping dock and at the customer's receiving dock. So the real, I guess the governing principle here is that we're trying to minimize the number of times we're handling product. So in that particular move or flow, we're only handling product twice. And in all of the research that we've done, one of the, I guess, common denominators of world-class supply chains is they handle product the fewest times possible uh, for each item and between each origin and destination in the supply chain. Every time we handle it again, we're more likely to make a mistake. We're adding cost, we're adding cycle time, um, we're adding complexity, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that we can ship everything directly, but what we'd like to do is to study uh, the items, the origins, the destinations, and make sure we've chosen the minimum cost flow path in each particular case. So direct shipping, again, we're moving product straight from the vendor uh, to the customer. So we're bypassing all of these traditional activities in the warehouse. Maybe the next best thing, or the flow path that does the next best job in minimizing handling steps, is cross-docking. The basic idea is we move goods, from the vendor into our receiving dock, but then we bypass all of the other activities inside our operation and then go to the customer's receiving dock. So we literally move goods from dock to dock, hence the term cross-docking. And we'll have a whole long session in here dedicated to the discussion of cross-docking. But in that particular flow, we're handling the product 6 times. So as good as that sounds, we've still brought product through a facility that we didn't have to work through in the direct shipping mode. And we've got 3 times the number of handling steps. So we have 3 times as many opportunities to mishandle product, to create damage, to create delays, to have an accident, et cetera, et cetera. The next best flow path, you could think of it that way, is what we call direct primary put away. In that particular flow path, we're bringing goods into our facility, we receive them, but we look into the primary pick location, and if product is needed there, we replenish directly out of the receipt, then to shipping, and then to the customer's receiving dock. So now we're handling the product 8 times. The next best flow, we call direct secondary put away. The goods, they're coming into our facility. There's no opportunity to replenish the primary location, but we can go straight to a secondary location, then all the way through the traditional flow out to customer receiving. And then the last and the least productive, you could say, receiving flow is traditional, where we move product through every activity inside our own building. And all of a sudden, we've gone from a best case of 2 handling steps to now we're at 12 handling steps. And you can imagine the opportunities now for damage, mishandling, excess cycle time, excess cost, et cetera, et cetera. So this is an analysis. We call it a touch analysis that we do. This particular one was done for a company called Lamb Research out in the Silicon Valley. They're one of the largest producers of machinery that makes computer chips around the world. And I mean, just this little step alone helped them take a significant chunk of cost out of their particular supply chain. It's looking at it, from a little different perspective, but it's optimizing the receiving flow for each product from each origin. It's a very, very simple but a very powerful concept in supply chain optimization. In this next little example, we go one step further, where we take those same flows that we just discussed, but in this case, we're not just assigning handling steps to each flow path, but we're literally going through and computing the cost of each flow path. This particular work was done for a company called the Schwann's Food Company They're one of the largest and best frozen food manufacturers in the United States. And you can see that the cost per, in this case, it's a cost per case of moving goods from direct shipping is 83 cents a case, cross-docking $1.43, direct primary put away is $1.78, secondary is $2.45, and their current way of handling product is $3.56 a case. So if we could just, move the flow path, not even for all of the product or all of the suppliers, but as much of that flow further um, back in this set of flow paths, it's significant savings. It's a significant benefit on fill rate. It's a significant lowering on the damage percentage. It's a significant lowering of the inventory, et cetera, et cetera. So again, it's not all product, it's not all suppliers, but where possible, we'd like to handle the product as few times as possible, and then reap the cost and the accuracy and the fill rate benefits along those lines. This last little schematic we developed for Amway. Amway, I'm sure you're familiar with, is a consumer products company, and it's just a walkthrough conceptually these different flow paths that we've talked about. So one of the clever things that Amway does is when a truck is inbound, that's what we're looking at over here. They monitor through GPS. I'm not all of that. I'm not. My handwriting is not so good, and my drawing is not so good either. But that's supposed to be a little GPS on top of that tractor that's inbound. They're monitoring as soon as a tractor is loaded and a trailer is assigned to it. They're monitoring inbound the status of that particular load all of the time, and they're working as the tractor trailer combo is inbound to assign the optimal dock door to that particular tractor trailer during that process. And the first thing that they do is they look at what's outbound while that tractor trailer is inbound to see if there are cross-docking opportunities for the goods coming in. So our first and best option is to cross-dock product, and you see that that particular flow highlighted in the chart. And then the next best option, as we have talked about, is to look into the primary picking location to see if there's an opportunity to replenish there. The next best option is to look into the secondary locations. And then, the option of last resort is to work product through the traditional receiving process. So it's nothing new here. It's just an opportunity to see what these flows look like um, on a conceptual design basis in a consumer products environment. We'll do one more example. This is from Spartan Stores, is a wholesaler up in the Northeast, a food wholesaler and retailer. They do a little bit of both. And traditionally, they have, they've done what folks traditionally do. I guess that's why we call it traditional. So over here on the left, these are our factories. These are the Nestle's of the world, the food manufacturers of the world. Product, moves through the Spartan warehouses and distribution centers out to their retail stores, and they achieve a pretty typical turn rate, which is about 4 turns a year, and maybe a little higher than that because it's retail food, but for the non-food items, it runs about 4 turns a year. And the reason that's the case is, that's pretty much how the world works. If the manufacturers, if their facilities are full and they've got to make earnings for the quarter to get things out the door, they're going to have a sale on it. And so the wholesaler, those buyers, they're incented to buy at the lowest possible cost. They always know at the end of the quarter, that's when they get the best deal. So those goods are coming in. Then the wholesalers' warehouses are full. And to get some earnings for their quarter, they've got to get some stuff out the door. So the retailer buyers also know this phenomenon is going on. So they know they can get the best deal at the end of the quarter. And then their warehouses and stores get full. And that cycle just goes on and on and on. It has been going on, I guess, as long as there's been a quarterly earnings report. So there's got to be a way to break that cycle. Um, and certainly in this particular case, our client wanted to get ahead of that curve. They wanted to know, what can we do to, to break this cycle. So we, like we often do, we took all of their SKUs through an analysis, all of their orders, all of their suppliers. And the first thing that we found is an opportunity for a product that's filling full truckloads anyway. It's has a regular demand pattern. It's not a lot of variability in it. And if it's going to fill the truck anyway, and we don't have to merge that product with any other set of SKUs, we're going to go ahead and bypass our entire distribution infrastructure and go straight to the store with that particular set of product. The next best option is the cross-dock option. So those goods, we're going to collect every day what the requirements are for store replenishment. We're going to communicate those back to the vendor. And then we have each of those vendors on 15-minute time windows for delivery into our distribution center. So goods coming from several vendors, multiple vendors, both ambient temperature and refrigerated, are combined on a daily basis out for daily delivery to these stores, and those are our B items. The C items, it was interesting in this case, there was a recommendation made to their board and their CEO that they eliminate the C items. The trouble with that is, if you're competing with Walmart or uh, a mega retailer, the only way sometimes you're going to get folks to come into your stores, as was the case here, is if you've got the right C items. And the probability that there's going to be at least one C item in everybody's shopping cart is actually pretty high. So in this case, in the simulations that we developed, eliminating the C items literally would have shut down their business. So then it becomes, what's the best way to handle those C items? By the grace of God, we found a distributor who only handled C items in the food industry. And so we asked each of our CPG suppliers to ship directly to them. And then on a daily basis, we get a shipment of C items into our distribution center, and they're merged with the B items, which creates another nice, it's just merged into the daily delivery pattern to these stores. So in this case, we were able to, well, it may sound hard to imagine, but we doubled the inventory turns and also significantly reduced the out of stock in the shelves, basically by improving, you could call it receiving flow. It's really improving supply chain flow and synchronizing that in dramatic fashion as compared to what we had before with the traditional process. So there's a lot of power in looking at flow in the network, and I just wanted you to see some examples of just how powerful that can be. And now we're going to take a look at each of these different flow paths and some more of the details behind each of them to see how we can execute each of those in a world-class manner. So the first of those, we've talked a lot about direct shipping. It's cross-docking. Um, the notion here is that, yes, we're going to receive product into our warehouse, but it's going to bypass all of the traditional activities of inspection, put away, etc. It's going to go straight from a receiving dock to a shipping dock. So there was a report that was done several years ago by the Warehousing Education and Research Council, and the report is one of the best reports, at least that I've researched on cross-docking, and I adopted this graphic from that particular report just to explain the general concept. So at least in retailing, the notion is, as soon as a cashier scans a barcode, there's an update to the inventory levels in the store, and that's called a perpetual inventory. If the inventory level drops below a reorder point, the replenishment order for that SKU, for all of the SKUs, they're accumulated, they're submitted to suppliers. Those particular suppliers move product out of their particular factories. If they're doing a good job with that, they may be consolidating that for each particular retail store. So you may have a pallet devoted to a store, and those pallets move through the retailer's distribution center. They're cross-docked directly from the receiving dock to the outbound dock assigned to that particular store. So that's in words and some schematics what cross-docking might look like. But this may sound sophisticated and sound expensive. That's not necessarily always the case. This one particular example is from Sony Logistics, just outside of Tokyo. In this particular example, um, truckloads, they can unload or load from any dock in this particular distribution center. When product comes in, um, it comes in to a down a powered conveyor lane. Um, there's a cart. It's called a cart on track conveyor that moves product from one lane to another, and that's really how the cross docking takes place. And you'll notice something very interesting. There's no human being standing in that distribution center, and that's because there aren't any. Um, this is one of the most highly automated cross-docking facilities on the planet, um, and they're very, very rare for full pallet options. For small items, this is a cross-docking operation at Kmart in one of their jewelry distribution centers. Um, it's actually a very clever design. So as goods come in, let me change the color of that pin, see if we can get this highlighted. So as goods come in from receiving, well, that's not any better, is it? Let's try yellow. See how that works. That works a little better. So as goods come in from receiving, they come in full cartons. About 60% of the cartons are diverted into the cross-docking activity. So as an inbound carton comes around, it comes down one of these conveyor lanes and is presented to an operator. That operator scans an inbound carton. Okay, you can see there's a little barcode label associated with each carton. When they do, that lets the system know what SKU is being presented. And as soon as that happens, the carousel begins rotating. In the particular carousel, each Kmart store, at least for jewelry, is assigned one of the totes in the carousel. So a light comes on indicating how many pieces we should be placing in each of those retail totes that are outbound. And as soon as we're done, this actually is a pretty clever design. I push the tote actually back out through the other side of the carousel, and it's headed out to shipping. So again, there's no magical formula for cross-docking. It can take many forms. I'm not recommending any particular form. I just would like you to see what options are out there, including a highly manual option. This is at a Japanese third-party logistics operator, and actually a friend of mine designed this particular facility. His concept was he wanted to be able to push every pallet in the DC through with a fingertip. So that sounds a little bit unusual, which I guess you could argue it is. So there's conveyor covering about 40% of the floor in the distribution center. So like in this particular operation over here that I highlighted, they'll load these cartons on what is called a slave pallet. You see that highlighted right there. And then if those goods are headed out to, which they wouldn't necessarily be, but if they were headed out to this truck right next to them, that's how they would handle that particular product. So cross-docking does not necessarily require a heavy investment in material handling systems. It will often require an investment in information handling systems, but I just want you to see the full range of alternatives that are out there. Now, there are certain types of loads that work especially well for cross-docking. Anytime there's one SKU in a unit load, so that could be one SKU on a pallet or one SKU in a carton, that works especially well because there's not excess sorting. that has to be done, and that's oftentimes the burden in a cross-docking situation. Back orders work well because there's typically one SKU in the unit load, and it has to go out immediately. There's a sense of urgency for it. Special orders could fall into that same category. If I'm transferring product between distribution centers, that's another good candidate. And then anytime the load is all ready for the customer and there's no need to combine uh, the product or the load with other product or other loads in the shipment that's headed out the door. Those are all good candidates for cross-docking. Now, there are some enablers. One in particular is ideally we'd like to automatically identify the unit load either with a barcode or an RFID tag to help with the sorting and the disposition of the product as it comes in the door. Second, we really need to be able to operate in real time. There's no margin for error in cross-docking. So the synchronization and the execution of those real-time communications, it's maybe the most difficult aspect of executing cross-docking. We're going to need some reliable suppliers who, if we give them uh, a receiving schedule, they can perform to it. Again, because there's no margin for error in this. And with dock management, it's the same idea. Docks are coming open and closing rapidly, so we're going to need to have a system that can manage the availability of dock doors on a real-time basis. And this lack of a margin for error is a very serious notion. And I had a client up in the Research Triangle a few years ago, and there was this area in the warehouse that was marked out, in big bold letters, cross-docking. So I asked them what they meant by cross-docking, and they said, well, that product comes in on Monday and it goes out on Friday. So that's not what we mean by cross-docking. We're looking something, you know, at a in the worst case, would be moving through the product within 24 hours. And really what we would mean here is within probably within a shift, or maybe even within a few hours. So these enablers are critical to be able to pull this off, and a warehouse management system to be able to execute it is critical to be able to pull this off. All right, let's keep moving here. I'm going to skip over to the notion of scheduling receipts. And without the ability to schedule a receipt, well, cross-docking can't run without scheduling receipts. One of the best receiving scheduling activities I've seen is at a company called Technisch Uni. They're kind of like Home Depot in the Netherlands, and each of their suppliers is given a 15-minute window that they have to hit. It's one of the major parts of their supplier scorecard that they get each month as a part of this. And if they can hit a 15-minute window, in many cases, I can turn the inventory in my warehouse within 2 to 4 hours. So if you're into calculating inventory turns, if I'm turning inventory multiple times a day, you can imagine what that would do to an inventory turn rate. Of course, the pinch point in here is the supplier capability uh, to hit those particular time windows, and that's rare, and it's not available for every item, and it's not available for every supplier. But where it is, we'd like to take advantage of it, and this group over in the Netherlands has been one of the most aggressive um, that I've encountered, and they're one of the most successful in that particular area. Another part that comes with this is the notion of receiving crew scheduling. So if I if I've scheduled a receipt, but the resources aren't there to support the processing of the receipt, what have I really accomplished? So one of the examples I like to use when I'm teaching receiving crew scheduling is with the airlines. And the if you don't have uh, everybody there that you need, if you don't have the flight attendant, if you don't have the fuel, if you don't have the paperwork, if you don't have the passengers, if you don't have the baggage, you're not going anywhere. And those resources, it's the same thing for receiving. At this particular example I pulled from one of our biotech clients. It's Invitrogen. So in this case, I highlighted if we don't have the dock doors available, I can't process the receipt. If we don't have the personnel available, if we don't have the lift truck available, there's really not anything I can do. So a big part of receiving scheduling to support these advanced receiving activities is the ability to assign resources to a receipt ahead of time, optimize the assignment of those resources to make sure that they're always available. And without that capability, again, I kind of fall back into a reactive stance at receiving instead of a proactive stance. Okay. One of the last things I wanted to speak about on the receiving side is the ability to assign inbound docks. And the basic idea goes like this. So if I've got a receipt that's coming in the door, and that's what I've highlighted up here in the upper left-hand corner, and I know where each of those pallets is going to be located, which if I work with a concept called pre-receiving, so I'm clearing things in transit, I'm assigning product to location in transit, I'm doing my cross-docking allocations in transit. If I know where each of those inbound pallets is going to be located, then theoretically, I can at least do a simple calculation of the inbound centroid. And what I'd like to do is to assign each inbound truck to the dock door that minimizes the processing time for that inbound truck, over and over and over again. And just that simple step alone, maybe worth, an increase of receiving productivity of 50%. Sometimes it's even 100%. Whirlpool is one of the best that I've ever worked with in this particular area, and they've used it to literally cut the labor in half in their receiving and put away process, just with some simple traffic management concepts. In this case, running around this inbound centroid notion. All right. Now, on the unloading side, again, I'm not necessarily recommending that we automate the unloading process, but I at least wanted to point out that option is available. The slides that you're looking at they're from a company called Kao. They're a little bit like Procter & Gamble in Japan. The picture that you see on the right, this is an inbound truck coming in. So let me get a little better highlighter here. We'll try yellow and see what happens. So this is an inbound truck. You'll notice there's powered conveyor in the bed of that trailer. So when we dock the trailer at the dock, sounds a little strange, but it's like a docking station, kind of like the International Space Station, or how the space shuttle works. Then there's also a powered conveyor on the dock itself, and when the operator or the driver pulls up, I'll show you a picture of this in just a second. It's as simple as they hit a button and the entire load comes off the inbound trailer and into the warehouse, and then down the line into the automated storage retrieval system. And you may say, how can you afford something like this? The systems actually aren't that expensive. Maybe 50,000 to 100,000 per dock. That may sound expensive, but when you look at the fact that you can unload a trailer in 5 minutes time instead of an hour or two, the trailer turn and the dock turn on that, way more than pays for that investment. The other thing I think you should notice here is, again, there's nobody in the picture. There's no people in the picture. It's because there's no people working in this particular operation. Literally, the driver gets off the truck, pushes a button, and all of this takes place in about 5 minutes time. So that's how you pay for an investment. Again, it's not something I'm recommending. It's just something that we're trying to let you know the full range of options that are available out there, and this is one of them. I can also unload cases automatically. There's nothing special about that. That usually takes place with a telescoping conveyor. Sometimes there'll be a robot on the other end of that conveyor that is literally automating the unloading of those cases. Two other well, I guess we got three other receiving principles very quickly. One is delivery quality compliance. The picture that, or the little schematic that you see, is from a company called Progistics. They're a third-party logistics operator in Canada. One of the suggestions I made to them is that they actually perform delivery quality compliance for their major customers. Bell Canada is one of their major customers. And receiving is presents an opportunity to do a lot of the inspection work in a location and in a status of product that is, it's easy to verify what's going on because we have a physical glimpse of it. We can take a picture of it. We can take video of it. Um, One of our clients uses robotics to do a visual inspection of every carton that's coming in. So in this particular case, we had about maybe 20 criteria that made up inbound compliance for the product coming into this particular distribution center. A combination of webcams and visual inspection, human visual inspection was used to monitor what was coming in from each supplier. And then, of course, each supplier gets a chargeback on any um, non-compliance issues, and they also get a reward if they exceed certain compliance requirements. And this was a service that Progistics sold back to their customers. It works well to this day. And again, it's the old, we're back to garbage in, garbage out. If we receive product improperly, it's very difficult to ship it properly. Also, if we don't give the supplier some feedback, um, it's a natural assumption that nobody's monitoring, what's going on back at the warehouse. So it's very important to capture quality compliance, delivery compliance during the receiving process, and to get that feedback out and to use it in a very proactive way of improving the accuracy, the quality, the timeliness, um, really the performance of the whole supply chain. That's a very critical activity right there. If I get really fancy, I mentioned here just a moment ago that I can automate that entire process. This is at a company called Quella. Quella is the largest mail order operator in Europe. Um, the system that you see, I got this one. I wish I had a chance to take this picture again, but I got this one shot of their vision system that is capturing about 100 different images as each carton goes through. Um, I guess we could call it a plane or a three-dimensional range, and it's looking. It compares for each SKU what the carton should look like with what it does look like, and it's always monitoring for a lack of compliance. If there is a lack of compliance, there literally is an automatic deduction on the purchase order for that product, and there's a correction made to the carton just downstream from this particular vision system. So it could be a label that's applied that wasn't applied. It could be a marking that's applied that should be applied. It could be diverting the case down a line. Um, if the case is not in the proper condition, it could be a reorientation of the carton if it's not received properly. The other thing that you'll notice here is, again, you know, there's nobody working in the picture. And again, it's the largest, most highly automated receiving operation probably on the planet Earth. Um, this is over in the eastern part of Germany. There was a heavy investment in this particular facility as a part of Eastern Germany coming back online. And again, it's not something I would necessarily recommend, but really just want to make sure that you see the full range of options that's available. Another aspect of it's really an informational aspect of receiving that's important is to use that time and that opportunity to capture cube and weight. I'm uh, stunned, flabbergasted, confused oftentimes when I ask our clients, if they have cube and weight information for their SKUs, how many of them do not have that information available? Yet in terms of basic information that is used to plan and design and manage and execute supply chains and to make all of those decisions. That's some of the most basic data that we're going to need. And so many times it's not available. And it's not that difficult to get it. This particular picture that you see is it's the receiving room from one of our retail clients. The device that you see is called a Cubiscan. It's a very simple device, very inexpensive. It works with sonar, okay? So it sends a sound signal in X, Y, and Z dimensions. So then you get the length, width, and height of the carton. You can scan in or speak in the number of pieces in the carton. So then you have an estimate of the cube per unit. And then, of course, it's also weighing the product as well. So now we've captured length, width, height, cube, and weight per unit and per carton. All of that takes about 60 seconds. We don't have to do it all of the time, but we'd like to keep all of the SKUs refreshed. In this case, we do a sampling of what's coming in, again, just to make sure that the database is always correct for this particular information, because we use it in picking, we use it in slotting, we use it in choosing storage modes, we use it in outbound packing. We use it in load planning. And again, these are the basics of supply chain decision making. And it's not that hard to get. It's not that expensive to get, and it's absolutely critical for running the supply chain. We don't even have to have a Cubiscan. This is a company that we've worked with over in Japan. The company is called Shinwa. They're they're a wholesaler of consumer products. This is kind of a poor man's Cubiscan, and it may be difficult to see in the picture, but each of these receiving carts has, I couldn't figure out what it was. I thought it was a car antenna or a RF antenna or something the first time I saw it, but as I looked closer, it is a car antenna. It's attached to the receiving cart, but there's 3 pieces of tape on the antenna. One's red, one's green, one's blue. It's so simple. So the basic idea is if a pallet comes up to the blue line, it's assigned to a blue location, blue storage location, red or green, and those match the dimensions of the pallets. And that way, I get a good, a good cube utilization inside the warehouse. So it doesn't have to be sophisticated. Um, that's one of the most clever ways of capturing cube information that I've seen. One of the other things that I like here is the receiving station is mobile, so I can go where I need to go. I've got in this case, they negotiated a very good rate on these laptop computers, so each receiving operator can do any warehouse management system transaction that is required. So it's very productive, very intelligent, very wise, works in a hurry, and one of the best receiving practices that I've come across in my travels. Weight information we use in all those same ways that we just talked about. So I can inbound weigh in a Cubiscan, I can inbound weigh in a lift truck. Not all that it's not something super sophisticated, but again, very simple, very inexpensive, and very critical for managing the supply chain. AccuSort is a company that's done a good job putting a lot of these concepts together. You could kind of sort of say specialize in receiving automation, everywhere from automated unloading to doing some of the verification and dimensioning techniques and weighing techniques that we've talked about. One of the other activities that I find is important at receiving and Putaway is what we call pre-packaging. This particular example comes from a company called Nashua. They're an office supplies company up in New Hampshire. The basic idea goes like this. We oftentimes do a profile of the percent of a pallet or percent of a carton or percent of a truckload that is ordered when a customer places an order. In this particular case, we're looking at the percent of a pallet that was ordered. And what we found is that for a large portion of the orders, customers tended to order quarter or half pallet quantities. So, how can we take advantage of that? Well, if we have first of all, if we financially incent the customers to order that way, and we have some quarter and half pallet quantities already created inside the warehouse, then instead of picking, several cases independently, I pick one pallet all at the same time. So the handling cost per case is dramatically reduced. Now, ideally, the supplier would do this prepackaging for me. If they haven't, I may have to do some of that work at the receiving dock. And that's what we mean by prepackaging at the receiving dock. We're trying to get ready as early as possible for the quantities that the customer is going to order in. And this prepackaging concept goes a long way toward reducing the overall workload in the warehouse. Okay, now a few practices on put away. One is what we call put away prioritization. Not all putaways are created equal. Some may be associated with a back order, and they need to be moved through the warehouse in short order. Some can be worked into a cross dock, so they need to move off the dock quickly. Um, some maybe there's an SKU, it's the last SKU needed to complete an order, and we need to move that through put away in a hurry. Sometimes there's a customer that's really upset, and we need to move that put away through the process as quickly as possible. So the basic idea is when I set up my receiving and put away activity, especially in the warehouse management system, I need the ability to prioritize those put aways so I can recognize them, identify them, um, highlight them, and then move them through a prioritized process that may move ahead of the regular put away process. Another practice, I mentioned this earlier, is the notion of verifying a put away location. So again, if I put something in the wrong location, the odds that things are going to go well the rest of the way are virtually zero. Yet very few warehouse operators monitor put away location accuracy. So what we like to recommend is there's a process in place, a quality control process, where somebody, in short order, not long after the putaways have been executed, goes through and they verify that we put product away in the right location, in the right condition, in the right quantity, et cetera, et cetera. And you see one of those put away location verification activities in that particular slide. In terms of maximizing the productivity of the receiving and put away activity, we call this direct and directed put away. Direct means it happens immediately upon receipt. So we bypass a lot of the inspection and staging. One of our clients, Johnson and Johnson, they intentionally do not provide receiving staging space. So the product has to move directly off the receiving dock and into the storage locations. Again, we cannot execute that way with all the suppliers and with all of the product, but for those products and those suppliers where we can, we like to take advantage of working in this way. Directed just means, a lift truck operator left unto themselves, they might put product anywhere, um, near their friend, near the brake area. Usually it means, and this is human nature, I'd probably do the same thing, is to put product in the location that's the easiest to put product in for that particular set of conditions. Any one operator cannot know, what location is best for that particular incoming SKU. So they can't know which location is best for minimizing the travel time for the whole warehouse or maximizing the productivity of the warehouse. That's a system calculation. That's why the directed put away activity is so important in the warehouse management system, and having the operators follow that. And that's one of the things that we can monitor in terms of an operator's performance is, are they following what it was the system asked us to do? The particular application that you see is a company called Swagelock. Logistically, they're one of the best in the business. They're a supplier of valves and fittings out of Cleveland, Ohio. They have actually, this is their own in-house warehouse management system called Rhodes, one of the very best in the business. And they're always wondering, should they migrate to best of breed or an ERP warehouse management system? But they always struggle with it because the in-house system that they've developed is so strong, and they were one of the early adopters of this directed put away process. One way to think about put away is it's a lot like order picking in reverse, and a lot of the practices that work well in order picking also work well in put away. So just like you would batch orders for picking to make picking more productive, and you would sequence those picks to make picking more productive, oftentimes it makes sense to do the same thing in put away. So we call that batched sequenced putaways. This particular example that you see is from a company called Hugenbosch. They're a retail group over in the Netherlands. This is one of their shoe distribution centers. So you can see inbound cartons coming from the receiving dock, and there's a sortation system that does the sequencing so that as I load product into that roll cage for put away, I'm going in reverse location sequence. So I'm batching into the roll cage, and the first stops on the put away tour are going to be up here at the top of the cage, and the last stops are going to be down here at the bottom of the cage. Now, if I get really, really sophisticated, just like I can automate unloading, I can automate that entire put away process. Again, it's not something I'm recommending. It's just something, I want you to see the full range of options that are out there. This particular put away process is at a company called Scroll 360. They're one of the largest mail order operators in Japan. It's a company that we've enjoyed working with for several years. The way they operate put away is a carton shows up um, in a staging lane in front of an automated storage retrieval system. These have come directly from their suppliers. There's no staging of product. There's no inbound inspection. They've done a super job working out the quality requirements. It's not just the quality requirements. It's product quality and delivery quality. One of the most sophisticated I've ever worked with in that area. Product comes straight from those suppliers. An ASRS machine that you see here in the center of the photo, that is about 90 feet tall, okay, is taking those inbound cartons and automatically placing those in optimized put away locations for each of those inbound cartons. So you notice you don't see anybody in the picture because nobody is in the picture. That's what we mean by fully automating the put away process. Again, not something we recommend necessarily, but we want you to see the full range of options that are available. It was an unusual, you could call it automated put away process I came across. This is with a company called McKesson. It's a wholesale drug operator. The storage area that you see in the inset is what I call a high bay carousel. It's about a 40 foot tall carousel. It's about maybe 250 feet long. It would be like the pallet rack in your building rotating about itself. That carousel, they hold hundreds, thousands of megatotes. Okay, so one of those megatotes could be 3 by 3 by 3. Those are essentially the storage locations. In this particular case, those storage locations come on a conveyor to an operator who's stationary. All right, so these are the inbound receipts. Okay, and those cartons are placed um, in these megatotes. I'm not sure about that process because maybe you could think, why don't we just put the whole pallet away, which is pretty much what I thought. But again, it's an option that's out there. It's rare, but it's in the range of automated put away systems. Okay, we got two more. This next one is maybe one of the most important. It's a practice called interleaving. The basic idea is that when a truck shows up, uh, change this pen color here. Okay, so here's our inbound truck. The typical process is for a receiving operator to take a pallet, okay, and they travel to the put away location. They come empty back, pick up the next pallet, and they're just making a loop. That unload and put away process, okay, the driver and the vehicle are fully utilized. The trip back is called deadheading, and they're not utilized at all. So you could argue that there's about a 50% utilization of the driver and vehicle on a typical inbound unloading process. Better would be when the inbound truck comes, we do the unload and put away. But for the operator, if they're when they are at that location, if there's an activity for them to do very close to where the put away occurred, such as a retrieval, why don't we go ahead and execute that, do the pickup, do a loading, and then we're 100% utilized. Now, that activity didn't necessarily have to be um, a pickup. It could have been a cycle count. It could have been a replenishment. The basic idea is after every transaction is complete, the warehouse management system is looking around geographically for the next best thing for the operator to do. So if I don't, if I don't have to release that trailer, in a super hurry, I've got the freedom then to work geographically. And if I take that to its fullest extent, if every operator is working that same way, whether it's on a lift truck or picking product or whatever they might be doing, I can double or even triple the productivity of the warehouse. And when I go from interleaving to what some operators call task management, task optimization, sometimes it's called continuous moves, but it's a very powerful practice. Only the best of breed warehouse management systems implement it, but that practice alone oftentimes will pay for the warehouse management system investment that we're working on. The last practice I wanted to mention is called receiving simulation. Receiving is, I would say, potentially the activity in the warehouse that is the most prone to bottlenecks. And the best way that we have found so far to, if you to look ahead and see danger and to avoid it is simulation. So whether it's a 2D simulation or an animation, it's not necessarily all that difficult to do. A lot of simulation templates already exist. This particular simulation we did for Kimberly Clark, but the basic idea is, you're looking for bottlenecks um, on a computer screen before they happen out on the warehouse floor. So that bottleneck could be a dock door. That bottleneck could be in the number of lift trucks. That bottleneck could be in the number of operators. That bottleneck could be in the number of storage locations that you've provided. But it's much less expensive, much less damaging to find it out on a computer screen than it is once you get that warehouse operating. So if you want to keep moving with this, I mean, these are some exercises that I typically like to have our students and our seminars work on. These are exercises that are very healthy to do inside your companies. When I'm doing workshops with our clients, this is the set of exercises that we work on. One is I ask, what supplier capabilities do you need to help implement these practices that we've talked about? How would you redesign your docs or lay out your docs to be able to implement the practices that we've talked about? If you're running a cross dock, what's the best shape for it? Um, to implement these principles, what what would be the characteristics of the items or the suppliers or the carriers required to be able to turn on direct shipping, cross docking, direct primary put away, direct secondary put away? What are those requirements? And then how could you work in the supply chain to make sure they were implemented? And then if you want to do your own little report card, the last page in our deck has a little simple checklist of the practices that we've talked about, and you can either check them and do a 0-1 score. You can do percent of the practice that you have implemented out of 100%, and then record your scores and give yourself a score, out of 100, and make a. This is exactly what we would do if we were conducting a workshop. Is we'd go through each of those, and we would do that assessment, and then we would develop a gap closure plan in all of those principles that we thought were appropriate to close those gaps in receiving and put away. So that's a quick trip through world-class receiving and put away. I hope it's been helpful. We, we'll do these same modules for pallet storage, for case picking, for each picking, for order picking, um, packing, the layout of the warehouse. So we'll walk through the entire warehouse in this same kind of format. If you have questions about anything that we've described, you're welcome to send me an email at edfrizzell@lriconsulting.com. Also would like to encourage you to visit my YouTube channel.